Honeybee Health Coalition's decision-making tools. And this is another one of those websites that you should all be familiar with, the Honeybee Health Coalition. Because if you ask 5 beekeepers a question, especially about mite treatments, you're going to get at least 7 different answers. Everybody's got their theories and everybody's got their favorite ways of dealing with it, but we need to know about varroa mites before we start knowing how to deal with them. So they were indigenous to Asia, and the bees that grew up with the varroa mites are the Apis cerana, and they have developed some ability to resist or coexist with varroa mites. They do a lot of cleaning, and they can deal with the varroa mites. But the Apis mellifera, varroa mites are new to them, by and large, and so they don't have any coping mechanism for it. So varroa came in the late 1980s when they were accidentally introduced with imported bees into Florida. And that's one of the reasons why we are no longer able to import breeding bees to the United States. Arriving in the 1980s, it took a little while, not that long, for them to spread all the way across the U.S. They are everywhere in the world now. They have finally taken root in Australia. I hear that there might be a few isolated islands that don't have them, but it's basically a worldwide problem now. And it may be a major cause for what was termed colony collapse that we heard a lot about in the 90s and the 2000s. So a varroa mite is an ectoparasite. That means that it lives on the outside of the bee. The adults can live on a bee for many months. So that means that in places where there is no brood in the winter, where the queen actually shuts down, in places like northern Europe and Alaska, and places that are cold where they stop producing brood, you can still have varroa mites that make it through the winter. They enter a larval cell 1 to 2 days before the cell becomes capped. They have an approximate 30-hour reproductive cycle. So they can produce 2 to 3 offspring before the bee emerges, but they really like drone cells, because the drone cells give them time for another reproductive cycle or 2.
Janet, I learned something valuable recently by accident. By mistake, I put a medium frame into a deep, and they did their part and filled it up underneath with basically 100% drone cells. And when I caught it, they were all capped. So I took the frame out, replaced it with a full, took that out, froze it, and then the next day, you can break that stuff like peanut brittle, and you can look at all the drone brood, and you can see the varroa mites on them.
And how far advanced were the drones? Were they? You could see the varroa?
Oh yes, they were. I mean, they were within days of coming out, so I hit it just about perfect.
Yeah.
And I probably broke out and looked at, I don't know, probably 100 larvae, and find, I don't know, two varroa mites. But it was very interesting to, trying to capitalize off of a mistake.
Yeah.
Without killing 300 bees.
Yes.
That was not a mistake, that was drone trapping, that's deliberate.
Yeah.
That's my story, Bob, and I'm sticking with it.
There you go.
All right, so what can you do as a beekeeper to help you combat varroa mites? So you really need to understand the seasonal life cycle of the varroa mites and how they interact with the bees. You need to decide what kind of a beekeeper you want to be, how you're going to treat your bees. You need to test your colonies. because you need to know what levels your colony, what levels of varroa mites are in your colony to decide whether or not you need to treat. So you should develop a seasonal plan or a schedule that you follow. It's really best if you can keep to a schedule and then you don't forget and all those drone brood hatch, you know. And then just keep on learning. And getting ready for this, I found some really, really interesting stuff. So the bees increase greatly from the dormant period, which we don't really have here. There's not really, in this area especially, there's not really ever a time when there's no brood in there. But they are going to be increasing until they reach their peak population, which is going to be about when, do you guys think?
I don't know this kind of thing.
Could be August. One of the things that happens, they go from dormant to population increase as days get longer. So their circadian rhythms recognize the length of the day. So after the winter solstice, days are starting to get longer, and it doesn't affect them immediately, but they notice. And then the summer solstice, the days are starting to get shorter. So probably sometime late June and July, they're going to be starting to slow down some. And they are also going, especially here, that's when we have the nectar dearth. And so there's not as much nutrition for them. And so the queen can reduce her laying due to that also. But as the bee populations start to decrease, well, all of those mites are in the brood or going into brood, and so they continue to increase even though the bee population is decreasing. So now you have to decide how you're going to treat your bees. Are you going to do just cultural methods, and I'll explain what each of these are. Mechanical, do you want to go, what kind of chemicals do you want to use? What kind of, there's different ways of doing it. So IPM is integrated pest management, and it means that you're not depending 100% on chemical means of dealing with your varroa mites. There are cultural, there's mechanical, like drone brood removal is a mechanical way of dealing with it. And you want to have a number of different ways that you're doing it, because if you just depend on chemicals, you're missing quite a bit of things that you could be doing, and you're using the highest risk method of dealing with the varroa mites. So I was listening to Two Bees in a Podcast is really great, and it's exactly the right amount of time for me to go to the gym and work out. So I was listening to this episode 162, and he's talking about resistance to synthetic miticides. So that was the very tip of that pyramid. And there are, he says we have relatively few compounds registered for the use of for controlling varroa mites in honeybee colonies. Unfortunately, resistance has evolved for the tau fluvalinate, which is called Apistan is the brand name, the Coumaphos, which is sold as Checkmite, and now Amitraz, which is sold as Apivar. And these are widely used synthetic chemicals. A lot of commercial beekeepers use them all the time because they're easy to use and they can do a lot of colonies without too much labor cost. But because they've been used that way, and this is happening, it's all over the world, they're finding resistance to every one of the synthetic chemicals that we currently have available to us. That's not to say that they don't do something, but they are losing their power. So Amitraz resistance detection is actually pretty simple. If you're interested, he says he can send you packages, and that's his email address. So they ran a test from 2021 to I think 2023. They sent these test kits out to hundreds and hundreds of people all around the world, and tested them, and found that, you know, how much resistance there is. And so if you want to do this, you can do it also. They'll still run the test for you. So he works, I think he's out of Louisiana, not out of Beltsville. But you can look him up and find out more about him, and you can get some of those test kits for yourself. And then this is, I got this information off of another scientific paper, and it's a little bit hard to read. But so we're going to talk about cultural methods of dealing with varroa mite now. And primarily it is through genetics. So there's a number of different genetics now that you can look at. So they all have moderate efficacy, which means that they have a moderate ability to affect the mites within your hive. One thing, so genetic, I hear a lot about, oh, well, why pay for an expensive queen when she's just going to go out and mate with any old drone, and, you know, then you're going to lose a lot of that genetics. And it was interesting to see that they found that the genetic traits are largely due to maternal genetics, and so it's not so as easily reduced by the drones that they mate with as I had thought. But if they swarm and supersede, then that does get reduced. So buying new queens each year is a way to deal with it, because you're sure that you're getting a genetically varroa sensitive kind of queen. And this is a 5, and you'll see a lot of that 5 just meant that there is not a lot of data about it, that they haven't done a lot of studies, they haven't got very many peer-reviewed papers. And so it's hard to tell whether how good they really do. It looks like it's not as effective as some of the other strains of honeybees. So then there's mechanical. And mechanical is a lot less expensive than, say, requeening your hives every year. So a screened bottom board can reduce mite levels by 11 to 14% because the mites are dropping down and not crawling back up into your hive. Some of the mites, they're living on the outside of your bees, but bees do groom each other and groom themselves, and so some of the mites get knocked off. You can buy green drone comb, which has foundation sized for drone cells, and so when the bees build that foundation out, they're making primarily drone cells. Bob said he tried it and it worked one year and it didn't work the next, right? Or
it worked quite well in the initial burst. I took it out, froze it, put it back in, and they cleaned it out and put in more brood, more drone brood. Took that out, and then at about the 3rd time, they were not happy with me taking out all this drone brood that they had worked so hard for.
Well,
so, but it seemed to help. I mean, that worked out okay.
Yeah, so you can do that, but again, it's only effective during the spring and early summer when they're raising a lot of drones. So it has limited efficacy due to seasonal effect. And then cutting out drone brood. I keep usually 2 medium frames in my deep boxes. And I have to say I'm not real good at cutting the cells off the bottom, but I do sometimes, and I can take them over to my neighbor's chickens and they love it. Some of my medium frames, they have worker bee cells on the outside and then drone in the middle, so I just cut out that middle part. And I'm probably having some small effect on the mites. If I was really, really conscientious about getting in there every 3 weeks and cutting that out, I would have a greater effect on the mites. But I'm getting some of them, which is better than not doing anything at all. Some people will sprinkle powdered sugar inside the hive and get it all over the bees, and then that causes the bees to groom more and make more mites drop off. But again, that's very low in efficacy. Hyperthermia, raising the hive to 40 degrees Celsius for a period of time can kill the mites. And they do it for I think 48 hours or something, and it doesn't have that much effect on the bees. But again, there's not a lot of study done on it. There is one, I think it's the Thermavar device, where it's actually electrified drone frame. And so it heats up just that drone frame and kills all the mites and the drones. So you don't have to take them out and freeze them. They'll just clean it out. But I don't know if people actually use those. So then we have biological controls, and there is a fungus. There are some funguses and different things that they are studying a lot right now that seem to have some effect. The pseudoscorpions are, you can put those in the hive and they eat the mites, but I think I read that sometimes they kind of favor the larvae a little bit over the mites, and so you might not want to use them. But this integrated pest management control of the varroa destructor by Cameron Jack is a fantastic paper. It is amazing. You can find it at this address here. It's like 32 pages, but only at the very beginning is it really scientific, where it talks about determining levels of mites to decide when to treat. And the rest of it is just discussion of all of these different things, of all of the different ways of caging queens or using screen bottom boards. It's just a discussion, and it tells you the articles that he's read to look at and what the efficacy is, or things that people have done that have failed, and it's really, really good. So if you have the time, I highly recommend looking at that article. You can just read it a little bit of it at a time. It's very, very readable. So one of the first things you have to do is you have to test for mites. And some people want to do it with live methods where you don't kill the bees. So you can do a sugar roll with powdered sugar, or some people don't like to use powdered sugar because it has talc in it, or cornstarch, yeah, cornstarch. Sometimes they like to grind up the sugar, and I've got something I can show you about it, or using CO2 gas. But according to Dr. Peck, he's done a lot of studies, or looked at a lot of stuff, and he feels that the number of bees that survive after 7 days doing tests like this is pretty low. So you're returning them to the hive alive, and a sugar shake is not nearly as good of a way of getting a threshold level of mites as doing a alcohol wash or soap wash. So you're using a less effective method, you're returning the bees to the hive, and after a little while they die anyways. So his philosophy is that bees are a community, they're a whole organism, and if you're bothering the hive, some of those bees are going to sacrifice themselves to protect the hive and sting you. And so if I'm going to kill 300 bees, some of those bees are making the ultimate sacrifice so that I can help protect the hive. And you have to remember, especially at this time of year, the queen is laying 1,500 to 2,000 bees a day, eggs a day, which means there's 1,500 to 2,000 bees dying every day. So 300 of them that I would kill is not that much. So those are two testing methods. So this is another paper that I found very confusing, but it was interesting. So this, I don't know what's different about Slovenian powdered sugar, but Slovenia has a huge number of beekeepers. It's really, really important to the country, and so I don't know, maybe this test was done in Slovenia. Confectioner's powdered sugar. So the mite fall immediately after treatment was about 45%. And if you go to 24 hours after treatment, which you're only going to be doing that if you've got a screen bottom board and a sticky board underneath or something, you've got a 50% drop. So it's really not telling you that well how many mites you have in your hive. Exposed powdered sugar, I thought that was quite interesting. It drops greatly for exposed powdered sugar, which they said was like keeping powdered sugar in a jar in your car over several months. And it picks up moisture, and it just is not as good, and you're losing the efficacy of it. So here they're saying 4 days after treatment, 90% of the bees are still alive. Dr. Peck was saying 7 days after treatment, it's a lot less than that. The ground sugar, so some people, like I say, will grind their own sugar, and that actually does a lot better in compared to powdered sugar. And maybe it's because people grind it right before they use it. I don't know. But the longevity of the bees afterwards is 68%. So, you can do this and have a less realistic number of mites. You're not really sure how good your testing is. Or you can do with the alcohol, kill them all right away instead of letting them die slowly. But there are many people that don't want to do that. There's many, many people that feel that they want to put the bees back into the hive alive. And it's just a personal preference. So then you have the killing methods of doing it. And some of you might have seen these test kits. It comes with a little kind of a sieve thing. So you put the bees in, you put the top on, you shake it up, and then you can lift those bees out of there, throw them away, and you can read how many mites are in the liquid in the bottom. And that can be done either with an alcohol wash or with soapy water. And this gives you some of the thresholds. So if you're testing, usually we talk about testing half a cup of bees. A half a cup of bees is pretty nearly 300 bees. It's pretty regular, about 300 bees. So if you had 3 bees, or 3 mites in a 300 bee wash, that is going to be 1 mite per 100, and it's basically 1%. So that's not bad. You know, and as you pick up, you get more mites in there. If you're getting 9, 10, 12 mites out of a half a cup, you've got a real mite problem, and you need to do something about it. So this is from Cameron Jack, and this is a real nice way of trying to determine what your choices are for treating mites. So you can just work your way through it. Okay, so I have 0 to 2 mites per 100 bees. I'm increasing the population in my colony. So what am I going to do? Am I using it for production? No. So I can, you know, here's the different treatments I can use. If I'm using it for bee production or pollinator services, queen production, if I want honey out of it, these are some of the other things I can do. And I'm going to go over all of this in a much more detailed way. One other thing I did want to say, the recommendation is if you have less than 8 colonies, that you test every one of your colonies. If you have more than that, say you have 20 colonies, pick 8 of them and test them. So that little yellow topped testing kit, you have to do that with each hive, and it can lengthen the time that you're in the hive that you are working with the bees. If you have jars or even plastic bags that you have your liquid, you wouldn't do it with your live ones, but if you're doing the kill type, your alcohol or your soapy water or something in here, you can put the bees in, put the top on, shake it up so that they all die, and then you can put it aside and test it later when you're out of your suit, out of the sun. Make sure you've numbered them so that you know which hive they came from. But it allows you to get through your inspection more quickly. So now we're going to go to the Honeybee Health Coalition's website, and I hope that this will let me do it. So the Honeybee Health Coalition mission is to achieve a healthy honeybee and other pollinator populations in the context of productive agricultural systems and thriving ecosystems. So it's not all one thing or the other. This is part of an integrated system. So they want you to have healthy bees as well as healthy agriculture and economy. So they've got 2 really good tools. Yes, all right. So if we go to the Honeybee Health website, we can go to varroa management, and you'll notice they've got stuff about how to manage foul brood, best management practices, how to do things in order to be pollinators, use your bees as pollinators for these different crops. So they've got other things here besides the varroa management. In terms of varroa management, they have a lot of videos about how to do an inspection and how to use the treatments. They have a varroa management guide, and this is a book that will walk you through a lot of information. So it tells you how to do what integrated pest management is, how to monitor the populations. It talks about each one of the different ways of handling your varroa schedule and plan. Down at the very bottom here, we've got a worksheet to help you keep track of what's going on in your hives. as well as other resources. So what that looks like is it tells you about the honeybee populations, how to collect the bees. So it talks a little bit about the different kinds of chemicals and things that are available to you. And again, here are the videos, so it tells you about IPM, sampling methods, and we can watch some of these if we have time. And anyways, it tells you a lot of information that is also available here, but this doesn't, it's good to use both of them, to have that other printout available to you so that you can read more about it. This is primarily a decision guide. So, let's say, here, this will give you that information that I already showed you. Let's go ahead and say, yeah, we've got mites, we need to treat them. So, do you want to use synthetic chemicals, or do you only want to use naturally derived chemicals? As I said, a lot of people are still using the synthetics, but they do have resistance problems. They also have residue that stays in the wax, and so that's one of the reasons, along with pesticide residue, that people will remove comb about every 3 years when it gets really dark. They'll remove that, melt it down, use it for candles or something. Sometimes they paint it on plastic frames to help the bees get started with drawing the comb out. But you're removing that because you don't want to have too much residue from synthetic chemicals and pesticides, and then you use that on your plastic frames to get the bees started. It might be a better idea to separate the cappings or the wax from the drone brood that you cut out, because that is brand new wax and it's not going to have any residues in it if you're going to use it to paint plastic frames. So, okay, is there brood present? Well, right now at this time of year, yeah, there's brood present. Do you have honey supers on? Right now, yeah, we've got honey supers on. And we are in an increasing population at this point in time. All right, we've only got 2 choices of what we can use. We actually have 3, but this has not been updated fully. Mite away strips, quick strips, are they're still Formic Pro, and they're a different formulation a little bit, but Formic Pro is kind of the more modern, up-to-date way of providing that to the bees. So you look at this for Formic Pro, and it tells us a whole lot about it. And what you'll hear from almost every bee researcher is the instructions are the law. You have to follow the instructions. If you're not following the instructions, you might be hurting your bees. You're definitely not using it in the recommended way, which is technically illegal, but who's going to know? Anyways, follow the instructions are the law of how to use it. Okay, well, restrictions on Formic Pro, you can't use it above 92 degrees. And really, most people are saying 85 degrees or even 80 degrees. You don't want to use it much higher than that, because it's irritating to the bees. As the temperatures get higher, it becomes more volatile, so it releases much faster. You can lose your queen, you can lose some brood. So it's really good to do it earlier in the spring, but you'd have to look at your weather forecast. I think we've got, this mostly applies to the first 3 days. And I think we have some 3-day time period where it's going to be in the 70s or very low 80s coming up. So if anybody thinks that they need to treat their bees, if they've checked and they've got mites, it's still possible to do Formic Pro. So you need to read through that. There's 2 different ways of doing it. You can do 2 strips at the same time for 14 days. That is the most efficacious. That gives you the most mite kill. If you're worried about your queen, you can do 1 strip for 10 days, remove it, and put another strip in. But then you have to have a 20-day period, or 10 days, 3 days where the weather's good, 7 days it doesn't matter, another 3 days where the weather is good, and then you're okay. So the other thing about Formic Pro and Mite Away strips, quick strips, it will go through the caps on the brood. So it will kill mites in capped brood. And so that's very beneficial in the increasing population or peak population, as long as you can find the weather that cooperates. Also Formic can be used with honey supers on, which is one of the things that we checked as a decision-making tool. Nowadays, as of, I think maybe last year or the year before, oxalic acid can be used with honey supers on. Oxalic acid will not go through the caps on the brood, so it's typically recommended to use it at other times of year when there's not very much brood. Okay, so we've just talked about really the only 2 treatments that are available to us right now. If we go back, let's say it's August or September and the population is decreasing. Well, now we've got HopGuard. HopGuard is uses hop beta something or other, which comes from the hops plant, and that has a certain amount of efficacy. And again, if you read Dr. Cameron Jack's paper, he goes over every single one of these, and it's really interesting and helpful. HopGuard does not have a temperature requirement to it. If we go back even farther, let's say we don't have any honey supers on and we're at peak. Okay, now we've got a lot of other choices that are available to us. Oxalic acid, Apivar and Apigard are both thymol, which is the thyme plant. Again, they've got temperature restrictions on them. And oxalic acid doesn't. It's typically recommended that you use oxalic acid at a dosage of 2 grams per hive. Many studies have been done now saying that that's not enough, but that's what the instructions say, and if you want to abide by the instructions and do it properly, that's what you have to do. A lot of people have run tests and say, oh, well, you can do 2x, 3 times that much and not really affect the bees. But like I do, I use this for my oxalic acid, which vaporizes it. Again, look at all of your choices. You can do oxalic acid as a dribble. Most of these things that are for vaporizing, you cannot fit much more than 2 grams in here. And it depends on the weather. When I do 2 grams, if it's very cool, it crystallizes, the vapor crystallizes and falls out of the air pretty quickly, and then I get a bunch of crystals on the bottom of my IPM board. So it does not go through the caps, but if you were to use it every couple of days, how long does it take for a drone to emerge from its cell? 24 days. So if I used it every 5 days for 5 treatments, I am pretty sure I'm getting those newly emerged bees and the mites that are on them. So I'm still going to have mites in the cells, but I'm going to be killing a lot more of the mites, the phoretic mites. So that's, you know, that's a way of doing it. In fact, I had been doing it, I've been doing it once a week for 7 weeks, but you read some of the papers and it's not, doesn't show any that much more efficacy. So maybe closer together for a shorter time is better. There's only one Department of Agriculture approved oxalic acid. And if you look at the supply companies for bee supplies, they sell that one. Oxalic acid is very common. You can buy it at, well, they say you can buy it at Lowe's, but I couldn't find it there. But it comes in different grades. If you are going to not follow the rules and buy one that is not Department of Agriculture approved, make sure that you get one that's 95% pure or higher, because they'll sell lower ones, but then you don't really know what's in there, and that could affect the bees. So let's look at oxalic acid, and we can watch a treatment video.
When there is little or introduction and sampling methods videos.
So they've got all these videos.
This video shows when and how to use oxalic acid for varroa mite control. Other videos in this series discuss other control chemicals and techniques. The best times to use oxalic acid are during the population decrease and dormant phases, when there is little or no brood in the colony. Don't use oxalic acid if colonies are in enclosed, overwintering sites. It is not effective during the population increase phase unless brood is reduced. Do not use during population peak or when honey supers are on colonies.
So now it is legal to use it with honey supers.
Oxalic acid is a naturally occurring acid found in. Make sure that you are applying oxalic acid properly and safely. Wear goggles, chemical-resistant gloves, and a respirator when mixing and applying oxalic acid. Avoid splashing the mixture. There are 3 approved methods for treating mites with oxalic acid. The first method is to mix oxalic acid with sugar syrup and spray it on packages of adult bees. Mix 35 grams or 1.2 ounces of oxalic acid dihydrate crystals into 1 liter of 1:1 warm sugar syrup.
Okay, so packages are most likely going to have mites on them, but they are going into a new hive. They don't have any brood. They are going to take a little while to get started, and so you have a natural brood break. So you're already doing a kind of mechanical method of treating for mites by having that brood break. And I guess you can lengthen it by treating the bees before you put them in.
Before applying the oxalic solution to packaged bees,
but it seems
first engorge bees with a plain sugar spray, and then wait for 2 hours. This will slow their ingestion of the oxalic solution. Spray the packages with 31 milliliters, or approximately 5 teaspoons, for a 3-pound package, or 21 milliliters, 3.5 teaspoons, for a 2-pound package. It is recommended to wait 3 days before installing treated packages in hives. A second method is to drizzle oxalic solution onto bees. This is usually done during the dormant season on clustered bees for best results. Use the same solution of 35 grams or 1.2 ounces of oxalic acid mixed into 1 liter of 1:1 sugar syrup. With a syringe, trickle 5 milliliters of the solution into spaces between frames. Do not exceed maximum colony dose of 50 milliliters. A third method is to vaporize or sublimate oxalic acid to fumigate the colony. You need an application tool that heats and vaporizes the oxalic acid crystals. Some tools take longer than others to cool down between applications. Beekeepers with more colonies
I just
will
did
want to
mine
use
in
a
water
vaporizer that
and
works more
let the
rapidly.
water dry before I put more
Close
crystals
all
on.
upper colony entrances and restrict the lower entrance. Use dosing spoon to place 1 gram of oxalic acid powder onto the vaporizer. Turn on the vaporizer.
So I'm not sure why they say 1 gram there, because I believe in the other part it said 2 grams. But anyway, so you've got just a wealth of information here, and you've got videos if you need to know how to do a sampling. One thing that I do want to stress, and they mention it in here, when you do the sampling, you do need to take bees from brood frames. So it doesn't have to be all open brood, it can be cap brood too, but you want to get those nurse bees. But make sure that you check the frame before you shake it, that the queen is not on there, because you don't want to kill her. And then, you know, the forager bees will fly away, leave you with the nurse bees in the container. You can scoop up your ½ cup, put them in your kit, whatever you're going to use, and then any bees that are left in the container, you can just put them back in the hive. Anyway, okay, so that's what I wanted to show you guys, that because normally when people talk about treating for varroa mites, they just throw information at you, all of these different chemicals, all these different things, and it's a lot of information. And this Honeybee Health Coalition allows you to get that information at your own speed. You can go back and read it again, and it's just really helpful. And it's a very good resource for you.
How long does the vaporizer treatment take?
So this one, I tested it outside of the hive, and it took about 3 to 4 minutes. But when I put it in the hive, and it depends on how strong my power source is, as the power source is getting worn out, it takes 6, 7, 8 minutes. So usually what I would do is I would put it in the hive, set the timer or the stopwatch on my telephone, and I would wait about 7 minutes and then pull it out, make sure if it's clean or not, and then cover up the opening again. If I'm done, I'd cover up the opening, and by the time I have gone to start doing my next hive and I've completed the next hive, it's been about 10 minutes. And by that time, the vapor is probably starting to cool and fall, so then I can open the first hive up and the bees can go in and out again. But you need to do it with a bottom board in, because you don't want all the vapor going out. If you're doing Formic Pro, you typically want to put another box on top to give because it's really stinky. So if you have another box on top, then the bees can get up away from it a little bit, but it's still sublimating and getting into the air, but they have a little bit more room, and then they don't spend as much time bearding outside. Some of the other things, the Apigard comes in a little tray, and you might need to have a spacer because the tray takes up some room, so you might need to put a spacer down before you put the top on or put the next box on top of it. So any questions?
And
Yeah.
the respirator, I'm pretty sure there are different grades, because it's been 40 years, but I used to work with the chemicals that we had to have some that were certain grades for formaldehyde.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm presume there's different grades with different adsorbents in them, with different chemicals. Do you know any specifics about what? I mean, it's obviously not an N95, it's something.
Figure out what it is.
Okay, personal protective respirator, use 3M models 602 or 603, but not a painter's respirator model 601.
Okay, and is that bottom right paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
The ones I have are pink. I think they're color coded, so I have pink ones.
I mean, we used to have respirators, but depending on what area we worked in the shipyard, we had different cartridges to filter different things. Some were basically particulate filters, and some of them covered a lot of noxious stuff.
Yeah, so I've got one that I can change the filters on.
Yeah, they were just screw in, screw out.
Yeah, these clip on. So. Anything else? So you guys are all going to go and look at this website, right? Good job. Okay, I can stop now.